If you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. People think in life we get what we deserve. I don't believe that at all. I believe in life we get what we expected.
So I'd love to hear your journey from running successful companies, big exits, all of that stuff which so many people aspire to now shifting to being a messenger of something that is empowering to the world.
I never thought that the impact was going to be so powerful. When you start to replace judgment in your life with love and acceptance, then that's what I would call ascension.
The translation process from vision, from idea, from inspiration into form is kind of like pulling it through the veil. What are some of the techniques or tools that you've used?
Those ideas of infinite possibility, being able to take that realm of forms and bring it through this veil comes down, I think, to the following things. Not everyone on my leadership teams are all into the whole spiritual woo-woo aspects of things. Mm-hmm. I have found that those things are actually what allow you to manifest collectively.
What percentage of us is actually our conscious mind versus the unconscious?
I started realizing around the same time that everything that I judged was actually an aspect of myself I didn't like.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
Once you start getting into that mindset of heart-brain coherence, when the mind thinks and when the brain feels and thinks, that's when everything starts to really come together.
I see that with the people that I work with, that when people do a certain level of personal work, and they get to a certain level of inner fulfillment, the natural next step is service. So how can we share this consciousness ultimately, this state of being? How can we facilitate that for others?
When we finally have the feeling that our desire for truth has been superseded by our expression of love, that is what I believe to be enlightenment.
Thank you for hosting us in your beautiful home. The reason I wanted to chat with you today is because one of the things that I'm most fascinated by is this idea of integrated intelligence. So the idea that we have executive intelligence, the part of us that is here to do something, that is here to create something, that is here to take action with intention, with focus, with perseverance. And then the other side, which is that deeply intuitive, energetic intelligence, the part of us that feels, that senses, that is attuned to the emotional realm, that is not so focused on outcome, not so focused on results, but more focused on being fully immersed in what is here now. And those dualities are very present inside of me. And I see them as two super important ingredients in helping specifically people who are in leadership positions, people who are building things, people who are purpose-driven, to have a more comprehensive operating system from which to lead from. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious what your relationship to that is, and your relationship to yourself, because you're a very well-established businessman, but you also have this deeply esoteric side. And so you span this spectrum that's really broad, which is really unique. When's the first time that you explored deep into one or the other polarity that you can point to in your life?
I think my entire life I had kind of this jack of all trades, master of none mentality. And I don't even know why that started or where it started from. I think maybe it's because I grew up in the UK. I grew up in England from the time I was 7 until 14. I lived in England. So we got to travel all over. Not only the UK, but all over Europe. And so by the time I was 14 years old, I already been to about 30 countries. So I had a very different philosophical bent on my perspective on the world. And, from the great artists, from even all the way back to ancient Greece, all the way through to the majesty and the form that you see in Paris, I think my mind was full of those things from a very, very young age. And yet I was always kind of that grounded Taurus. So I always had this bend also towards not just coming up with ideas, but actually manifesting those ideas and bringing them into form. So my life has always been kind of at this precipice, I would say this intersection or nexus between these two entirely different worlds, the world of dreaming and ideation, and then turning that into tangible creations. So I can't even remember when I wasn't like that, I guess. I think I've become more and more like that as time has gone by. And I do fundamentally believe that what we think of as our brains and what our brains are is not what it actually is. What we think it is probably some sort of hard drive or storage device for accumulating facts and memories and things. And actually what it truly is more like an antenna. We're like an antenna where we can make our antenna balanced across the two hemispheres of our brain. And when we do so, then we're able to receive information from the universe itself. And I think that the way to do that is to find that perfect balance between masculine and feminine energy that's already inherent within each of us. And the left brain, if you're right-handed, is the masculine side of your brain. It sort of manages and controls mathematics and the natural sciences and materiality and rationalism. So it's the part of your brain that says, no, don't jump off that cliff. And then the other side of your brain is the creative, kind of wild and crazy. It also represents the feminine. It's the irrational aspect of the brain. But that's where the seed of music, that's where the seed of creativity and artwork is from. The occipital lobe is our part of our brain that we see things from, the back of our brain, because our optic nerve goes from our eyeballs, and the right eye connects to the left brain, and the left eye connects to the right brain, and it crosses over this place called the optic chiasm. And that's right at the pituitary gland. So it forms an X. That's why it's called a chiasm, right? And so what we have in the back of our brain is also the centers for the natural sciences on the left side of our brain. So that which is material and hard, right? And then that's where also our visual arts come from on the right side of our brain, which is more like the realm of forms. So balancing these two means that you don't only have ideas. And I think that's one of the things a lot of entrepreneurs face. They get lots and lots of ideas. They don't know where to focus those ideas and how to actually bring them into form and manifestation. But once you learn to balance those two aspects of your brain, then the creations just start to emanate out from that balancing and equilibrium.
So let's break that down, the translation process from vision, from idea, from inspiration, which is sort of this intangible, invisible realm or space. Translating that into form is kind of like to me, I see it like pulling it through the veil. Like there's a veil that sort of separates the visible world, the sensory world from all the other energetic dimensions that are also present. That of course we can tap into very viscerally when we maybe take a psychedelic or we have a deep breathwork experience. But on our day-to-day, we don't generally experience the energetic realms so viscerally. Some people who are highly sensitive do. And but I would say most people, there's this, I know that for me, I definitely suffer from like visionary overload and a new idea every day, and then the deep desire to actually pull it through and make it real. But somewhere along the way, a lot of times you just run out of the juice. Like the momentum just starts to, as it gets denser and denser and denser and more logistical and more practical and more challenging, it's so easy to bail on the idea and go back to the visionary space where everything is possible still. Yes. And it's so fun there, right? I love hanging out in the infinite possibility realm. Can you speak a little to your experience of that translation process and what you've noticed and observed in yourself in overcoming those challenges when things get sticky? How have you persevered through? What are some of the techniques or tools that you've used?
I kind of remember the first time I studied about Plato. Plato talked about this realm of forms that I mentioned. And the realm of forms is something like, it kind of explains why a child knows what a lion is before they've even seen a lion. Somehow, a child has like embedded in this place in his memory somewhere, somehow, the notion that human beings look like this, the notion that a bird looks like this, and kids learn animals and they learn phylotypes and haplotypes and everything of the genetic diversity that we see around us, whether it's flora or fauna, much better than we do as adults. Like my son right now knows every single kind of dinosaur possible, every kind of reptile possible, every kind of mammal possible. He has it all memorized. Being able to take this idea of realm of form, because that's the same place, where we can conceptualize forms of animals and archetypes that we think of. That's the exact same place where ideas go. That's where our ideas for a new product or a new venture that you want to undertake or a new real estate project that you want to basically go after. And those ideas of infinite possibility, right, sit inside of that realm of forms. And then being able to take that realm of forms and bring it through this veil, just as you described, comes down, I think, to the following things. I think it's the difference between leadership and management. So leadership is when someone can convey confidence in the future state. They can cast a beautiful picture or vision. They can paint in words what it is that you want to envision out that other people can get behind as well. The other thing that leaders do is they set high expectations for standards of performance, and they set an example that other people want to follow. But managers do something altogether different, and management is the aspect of this that I think is so critical to bringing things in from idea to form and actually making things happen. And the first principle of management is focus. Focus, focus, focus. If you can't focus, you can't do whatever it is that you want to do. You have to commit to that focus and make it that number one thing. An organization that you lead or run can only synthesize a maximum of 3 things at any one time. So all these ideas that it's so tempting to go after, to throw at your team, can make them feel like they're just whipsawing all around, right? So making yourself focus on 1, 2, maximum 3 things organizationally is the thing that actually is, it's the life force, it's that masculine energy that brings structure to the ideation itself. The next thing you have to do is you have to be able to measure against your objectives. How am I going to, this is my objective. How am I going to measure this thing? What are the metrics? What are the key performance indicators? What are the things that I'm going to have the organization measure against so that when I go and I see a dashboard, it's all related to, okay, here are the top 3 things, or the main thing, what's the main thing and the main thing, and then what are all the things that cascade off of that main thing that have to be executed upon successfully. So that measurement aspect of this is also so important, and then anticipation of what might go wrong. Now, a lot of people will focus on plan B so much that it becomes their plan A. I don't recommend that at all. If you are so focused on plan B, because that's your contingency, very often the contingency becomes your plan A, and that doesn't work. Right. So what you want to be able to do is have enough of a contingency planning so that you're ready for the rainy day. But, if you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. Whatever you commit to in your mind is what's likely to be the outcome. Because people think, in life we get what we deserve. I don't believe that at all. I believe in life we get what we expected. And whatever it was that we believed more ardently we would get is what we ultimately do get. And that might be, people that complain about manifestation not working for them, which is understandable. Usually, when you actually dig deeper into it, you find out that they had a fear that they wouldn't succeed. So that fear became stronger than their desire to win the thing that they wanted to achieve. So basically, it's a very, very different thing when you can bring it through those 3 aspects. Keep the main thing, measurement of success, and then from measurement of success all the way into this idea of being able to anticipate what might come around the corner. These are all critical aspects of management that bring ideas into form and reality.
So what you shared is very practical, I think, and in some ways very left brain. And then there's the other side, right, which is the part of you that has spoken a lot about, like, we live in a simulation and everything is a mirror, everything is a reflection, everything is vibration. So you use the word manifestation. And so what I'm really interested in is, okay, you can have a team, right? And you can all be sort of focused on the same outcome, the same goal, the same, success metric. But you're dealing with a variety of people who all have their own unique, what I call soul curriculum, like the curriculum that they came here to experience, the challenges, the trials, the tribulations, the unprocessed fears, the doubts, the insecurities, all of that's also part of the
very real
of the mix,
real
right?
life stuff.
And so I think it's really interesting because in some ways, the more humans you have inside of a project or an organization, the more you're now also their potential doubts or fears, conscious or unconscious, are now thrown into the soup of kind of the collective vortex that makes up this organization. And so I wonder how much can this more, I guess, quantum perspective, like this idea that, there's the Newtonian model of reality, and then there's like the quantum perspective. But this idea that we are living inside of a larger field of energy, and that the vibration or the frequency of our entire system, our mental, our physical, our emotional, our spiritual bodies, our unconscious and our conscious mind, all of that has a direct impact on the field around us, right? So have you integrated that awareness into the organizations that you lead?
Absolutely. And I do it in a way that is, up until now, it's been largely unconscious. So, not everyone on my leadership teams are all into the whole spiritual woo-woo aspects of things. So those three things I just talked about, keep the main thing, right? Focus, focus, focus. Be able to measure and anticipate what might come around the corner. I have found that those things are actually what allow you to manifest collectively. Now, what do I mean by that? So when people ask me, how do you manifest something on an individual level? I say, I don't like to use vision boards. Not that vision boards are bad. I believe in vision boards. You can do that. If you have an image of yourself or whatever, as a thin person, you put it on the refrigerator, it's going to do much better than you as an overweight person when you put it on the refrigerator door. I'll tell you that much right now, because if ever you have a desire not to do something, the universe doesn't distinguish between the two. Whatever is more powerful. So it doesn't really matter what you believe. It's how hard you believe it. It doesn't really matter what you believe. It's how hard you actually believe it. And the resonance of your voice as well will tag along with whatever it is that you actually do believe. And that's where you're going to have a huge amplification of this energy that comes from the solar plexus, that comes from the heart chakra, comes from the throat chakra as well, which is what really manages leadership. The throat chakra is the thing that we cast spells, right? We use our voice to be able to bring things into manifestation. It's where magic is derived from. It's from the throat chakra. There are three layers within it: self-aware, self-actualize, which is still dependent on time, and then self-transcend, which is literally magic. You're casting magic spells. So those three things I just talked about, they sound very left brain, but actually it's the way that collectively people change their expectations on what will happen. And that change in expectation and their belief system, because all you really need to do is get your whole organization to believe that it will be achieved, and actually that it has already been achieved.
Right.
So as an individual, the thing that I like to do rather than vision boards is I like to think and feel, and I put emphasis on the latter, as if I've already achieved what it is that I wanted to achieve. I used to do this by buying watches. So I would do this thing whenever I would be facing a big demon, right, or a dragon. I've got to slay this dragon, whatever it was. I would go and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd feel this anxiety and I'd feel this pit in my stomach. I'm like, I'm going to run out of money. I had all these companies that were startups. How am I going to fund all these companies? It's like, daddy's only got so much, right? It's like, so I'm like, how many kids do I have? And anyone that says that founders and entrepreneurs start companies to make money, I don't think that's really true. Founders and entrepreneurs start companies because they want to change the world. And what's interesting is that, when people ask me, well, you started this company so you could make money, right? I'm like, that's kind of like saying, did you have your second, third child or fourth child so that they could make you money? Because it's literally the same. Having companies and starting companies is like having children. And you kind of look at their development and growth. You want them to live and make it past their first few years of life. And then it's like, oh my gosh, they've made it to 5 years old. It's like, oh gosh, this is so good. They make it to 10. Okay, he's probably going to survive. Right?
Oh, man.
I mean, this is true story stuff.
Yeah.
This is real life stuff. And so what I try to do is I try to imagine, I did this with my kids too. I try to imagine as if it's already happened, and then I feel the feeling as if it's happened. So the best way I could do that was I used to go buy watches. So I was in Shanghai in 2014 with my daughter, and she was 18 years old, and we're having a great time. And I took her, to the coolest, most modern city in the world, Shanghai. And I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking, oh gosh, one of my companies is either got to go public, it's going to run out of cash. The burn rate was $10 million a month.
Jesus.
I'm like, how the hell am I going to do this? But it was a unicorn, had $1 billion plus valuation already. And I was like, and it was almost 200 million in sales. But the reason why the burn was so high is because the working capital needs were so high because we're growing so fast. And so I got kind of freaked out that one morning, and I woke up in my hotel room, and I, knock on her door. I said, "Hey, sweetheart, we're going to go to the mall today." She's like, "Why?" I'm like, "I'm going to go buy a watch." So I've always collected watches, and I said to myself, okay, I want this particular watch. It was an octagonal shaped watch, which 8 means abundance in Chinese. So I'm like, in China. So I'm like, I might as well get an abundant watch, right? Of course, it's an expensive one. Mm-hmm. And so I went to the store to buy this very expensive watch. Now, you might think, why the heck would you buy a watch? What's the point of that? Well, at that time, before I had before we were all so addicted to our iPhones, and now we look at our iPhones for the time more than anything else, I used to look at my watch a lot during the day just to keep track of where things were during the day. And when I would buy this expensive watch, I would give it to myself as a gift for having already achieved the thing that I wanted to achieve.
Celebrating the success in advance.
Yeah, so it wasn't delayed gratification. Mm-hmm. It was instant gratification for me. Mm-hmm. But what I was doing is I was bringing the future state, collapsing it as a wave function into the now. You talk about quantum physics. Mm-hmm. So I was practicing quantum physics in my own mind. So every time I would look at this watch, and here I was worried about running out of money. Mm-hmm. So I go and spend, $30,000 or $40,000 on a watch. Doesn't seem very smart.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like
not the most responsible choice.
No, but it's burn the ships.
Right.
Right. So it's like, I don't like the story of Cortez because it's a terrible story, but he came into Mexico, and he decided that, he had 300 men, they had 6 ships. They get off the ships coming from Spain, and everyone goes to relieve themselves in the forest, and then they come out the beach and all the ships are on fire. Mm-hmm. And they're like, "Why are the ships on fire?" And he says, "Oh, I burned the ships. There's no other ships coming. Not for a year. The next ships aren't coming for a year. There's 300 of us. There's 3 million Aztecs. And they got a lot of gold. We've got to get their gold." Now, he had the craziest, luckiest thing ever when, the Aztecs came out to the beach and looked at him and thought he was Quetzalcoatl. Thought he was the returning god, the feathered serpent. So it's like you never know what might come around the corner, right? You never know. So, but this was the idea of burning the ships. He couldn't have the risk that the men would say, "Let's just go back. Let's kill him. Let's go back. Right. This is really too hard." He took that option away for people. So what I was doing was I was doing that with myself. I was burning the ships. Why would I spend so much money? I'd already collapsed the wave function. I'd already felt as if I'd succeeded, and it always worked. Mm-hmm. So this is why I bought watches. And time was always something that I felt was fluid. I always felt like it was something that was just the maximum point of our expectation. And whatever it is that we believe in, our self-doubt, our negative self-narratives, the things that little reel that we have playing in our head is actually what sabotages us from actually manifesting the things that we want. Mm-hmm. Because we maybe feel we don't deserve it. Mm-hmm. We maybe feel that we're not capable of it. We maybe have some trauma from being a child when our parents or somebody else, a teacher in 2nd grade, said that I wasn't very smart or something. These are all the things that we carry with us, and these become belief systems that then become reality. Mm-hmm. It is not, a lot of people say seeing is believing. I don't believe that at all. It's believing is seeing. Whatever it is that you believe will manifest. It is part of the quantum field. If you truly believe it, you'll feel it emotionally, and that will set a resonance that will then attract those things into the world around you.
And what percentage of us is actually our conscious mind versus the unconscious? Because believing, to choose to believe, like I can say, okay, I choose to believe that I'm going to win the lottery. And I'm going to believe it with every particle of my being. I'm going to celebrate it's already done. I'm going to just live in that future memory of it. Like, there's no way this can't happen. And so then, if I truly believed it, then I should win the lottery. Now, there's also the unconscious part of me that is a huge percentage of me that might really not believe that I am going to win the lottery. There's also, I feel, the collective belief system that says, yeah, winning the lottery is really unlikely. And so I'm up against all of this sort of cross-current energy, right? Which I might not even be able to see because it's in a blind spot, a lot of it. How would you address that?
So that's the big challenge right there, because you probably do have fears that you won't actually win the lottery.
Yeah.
And then that actually is what manifests, because it became stronger and you were just falsely telling yourself, I'm going to win the lottery. I'm going to win the lottery. I don't really believe I'm going to win the lottery, but I am going to win the lottery, but I don't really believe I'm going to win the lottery. These are the things that go through our heads.
Right.
You need it to be in coherence. Now, you asked about the separation between the conscious and the unconscious mind. Let's say that what you perceive as you to be, is sitting across from me. But actually, there's another aspect of you, and that is your you inverse. It's all around you. I say you inverse not because I'm just saying it facetiously. I'm saying it because it's literal. What is inside of you will project to the world around you. And it does it moment by moment, second by second of your experience. This separation between conscious mind and unconscious mind, or conscious mind and subconscious mind, is what we believe is what we call separation, right? We're born into separation. We think we're separate from everybody else. We think we're separate from everything else. And we build up our persona to create even more separation. From the moment that we feel shame or guilt because someone told us that we did something wrong, or we believed we did something wrong, or Adam in the Garden of Eden said, oh, I was naked, so I covered myself with fig leaves. Who told you were naked? This is where the separation of duality comes in. And so we tend to think that the world around us is separate from us, but actually it's not. It's just a reflection or projection of what's inside of us. It's like an iceberg. Imagine an iceberg that we could only see, 20 feet above the water of it. But actually it's 200 feet underwater as well, submerged. Now the iceberg, if it were sentient, might look at the world around it and say, oh, I see a moon at night. I see a sun during the daytime. I see boats, on the surface of the water. I see birds basically flying above me. I see a whale spout water right next to me. And this is my world, and I'm separate from all the rest of it, without even knowing that there's a whole gigantic piece of the iceberg that's under the water. Well, what if the entire experience above the surface of water, and that surface is just a mirror reflector, is actually the projection of what's underneath the water that is that iceberg? That is how we project our world around us. We don't realize it every day, but we do live in a you inverse. So there's you and there's a you inverse. Now, what's the experience you experience? It's what's been chosen by you. It's actually eternal. You chose this path. You chose this circumstance. You're not a victim. You chose it all. That's hard for people to get their heads wrapped around sometimes. But actually, it works also in business, because the whole point of this world and this life is to figure out why we chose what we chose. What was it we were trying to learn through our experiences? And if we can capture that and find the thing that's totally in line with our soul's path and our soul's journey, this is speaking to the spiritual aspect that you mentioned earlier, then everything starts to come easily. And this is, in astrology, there's something called the North Node, right? And the South Node. Do you know your North Node?
Oh, God, you're putting me on the spot. I did. I just can't remember. We talked about this last time, and I looked it up, and it's evaporated from my brain.
For some reason, I want to say it's Capricorn, but I don't remember exactly. But I know mine. Mine is Pisces. So my South Node is the opposite of Pisces, which is Virgo, which is very judgmental, right? It's a very judgmental aspect. It's also earthy, right? It's very much in the ground, duality. And, it was good for me because I learned how to navigate in this world in what people often refer to as the third, but it's actually fourth dimension, because we have time, and time is the ultimate scarcity. Right? We have units of scarcity we call minutes and seconds. We have units of scarcity we ascribe and pay for those minutes and seconds we call dollar bills. And what I realized was that when my realization came that my North Node was Pisces, which is really a mystical more of a mystical teacher, a wisdom teacher, I was like, wait a minute. That's what's been pulling me my entire life.
Because your north node is where you're heading, right?
That's where I'm heading.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what had been pulling me my entire life. And I didn't know, and I fought against it. Mm-hmm. But again, that was the journey I chose, to fight against it so that I would ask myself the question, why did I want to learn this? What was I supposed to learn? And then I realized, oh, this is my soul's journey. Mm-hmm. We're all in our own hero's journey. And so if you can find the thing in your career that matches your north node, then you'll find whatever way that you can overlap. And that it's that ikigai diagram that you see, that mm-hmm. Japanese, the things you love to do, the things you're good at doing, the things the world needs, mm-hmm. right? The intersection of all these things is ikigai, mm-hmm. which is like this, sort of nirvana for career. Mm-hmm. And it's a powerful aspect, because once you find yourself in line with that soul's journey, then everything you do becomes much, much easier. You get to be in flow. And then the manifestation becomes much easier too, because you realize that, wait, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So that belief system, the strength with which you believe something, it's not what you believe, but how hard you believe it, that will manifest. That realization is, I think, something that very few people actually understand.
There's different trains of thought on this. I'd be curious, just drilling down a little further. There's this saying, right? You don't get what you want, you get what you are. Like, you get more of what you already are. So if you're in a state of deep desire, there's in the world of manifestation conversations, there's like the desire is like the attractor, and it pulls the thing in, or the expectation. But you could also then counter argue and say, well, if I'm in a state of desire, I'm just going to manifest more desire. If I'm in a state of expectation, I'm going to manifest more expectation. So really what I want to be in is in the fulfillment of it already being done, and really getting into that place of not wanting anything. Like, there's almost like what's the end goal? Is it desirelessness? Yes. I think that's a really interesting conversation.
Well, this is, you're pinpointing on exactly why I don't like vision boards.
Because they put you into a future.
Yeah, they put separation between me and the thing that I want.
Right.
And so it's like this. If you need credit and you go to a bank and say, I need credit, the bank's going to kick you out and say, get out of here. We don't have time for this. They're not going to give you credit. The only time you can get credit from a bank is when you don't need credit. So it's like all these people that are like, Gen Z, and even some millennials are like, I went to the bank. I don't understand this. It's like, they said I need a credit history. How do I get a credit history if I don't have credit? It's like this paradox of life, right? Yeah. There's all these weird paradoxes that we all have. Well, it's the same thing is true. The bank is no different than the universe in this context. The universe is going to give you according to the emotional state that you already are. You don't perceive the world as it is. You perceive it as you are. So as a result of this, the more you create separation between you and the thing that you desire, through that desire itself, the desire becomes the emanation of suffering.
It's the lack.
It's the lack. You're
the desire
creating more lack.
Implies that I don't have it yet.
That's right.
If I had it, I wouldn't be desiring it.
That's right. So the best thing you can do as a manager and leader is to convince all of your employees that the thing that you guys are going after is already done. Mm-hmm. It's already created. And the way you do that is by not whipsawing them around with too many ideas, because then they can stay focused on the 1, 2, or 3 things that their organization is going to basically execute on, and they realize what role they play in that execution. That they'll know also that everyone expects that there could be weird things that happen, like force majeures. You could have a bad storm that comes and tears down your warehouse or something. So what would you do as a contingency in case that were to happen? It's just a preparedness sort of process. But that also gives comfort to the employees. If the employees are afraid, they'll never manifest what it is that you want to achieve. And then the measurements are continually convincing them. You ever try to lose weight by not standing on a scale? It's really hard. It's the measurement that creates something called the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect, another left brain concept, but it basically says you don't get what you deserve. You get what you measure. You get, because that measurement, the very act of measuring something, causes you to change and reform your expectation towards a new reality. If you lose 1 pound, you'll expect that the next day you might also lose another pound. Or maybe 2 or 3 days later, you'll lose another pound. And you've already seen it in your mind. I'm stepping on the scale and I feel so happy because I lost this weight. You follow what I'm saying? So anything that creates separation between you and your desired goal is going to only create greater separation. So if you are desiring something, desire, you believe that you're not enough already. I just had this conversation with a wonderful woman that I work with that, she said to me, she's like, I'm this age and I don't have all the things that I expected to have. And I don't have the house that I wanted. I don't have the children that I wanted. I don't have any of these things. And I said to her, and I think the world of her, and I said, have you possibly considered that the moment that you see yourself as already enough, that all of those things will be made manifest for you? That they're literally waiting for you to stop desiring them? It's a deep thought.
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. But it's like anything else, you start to build a habit by doing it.
The habit of self-worth.
The habit of self-worth. Because you then start to ask yourself the question, well, why do I need all these things to be enough? And that's the journey that your soul wanted you to go on.
Yeah, my experience of that, having stripped myself down again and again and again, to zero, and in some ways, metaphorically, in some ways, very tangibly, quitting my job with no backup plan, with no savings, facing $0 in my bank account again and again, shaving my head, going through these massive resets of just stripping away all the things that where I was assigning external worth, right? Where this external thing was somehow contributing to my sense of self and my sense of worth, and what happens when I let go of that? Who am I without that? That was the question. So you went
totally bald once?
I went fully bald.
Full on,
shaved down to the skin.
Sinead O'Connor style.
Full blown, yeah. I actually really liked it, but it was still an edge, because
edgy for sure.
For women, a lot of their worth is, of course, their
hair,
looks, and then their hair.
Totally.
And really questioning what is femininity, and recognizing I feel actually more androgynous in my inner being than I do female or a woman. And so all of these interesting explorations, all of that to say, through that process that took several years, there was this continued deep sense of finding the worth without needing any of the external stuff. And getting to a place where I found myself, at first it was I would touch it and I would feel what it feels like to feel completely fulfilled, utterly complete within myself, not needing anything external to be different, not needing anything to complete me, and just basking in that. And then that would sort of dissipate and fall away, and I would go back into some pattern of fear or contraction or doubt or disbelief. And then I would kind of go through these phases where the sense of self-worth as a core foundational, anchored belief system just got more and more consistent. And I call it a stabilizing, where I felt like I was stabilizing in this new knowing, this new way of perceiving myself in the world around me. The same way that when you start with a skateboard, right, and you fall off it, but then eventually you stabilize, and then you trust that you're not going to fall off the thing. It was the same thing with the sense of self-worth. And what I found is that my relationship to creating changed, because I was no longer driven by the desire to create from a sense of lack or even a sense of desire, but really from a sense of what would be possible if, and how can I take what I've learned and actually make it available to more people? They're really, this service-based mentality started to come online in a big way. And I see that with the people that I work with, my clients and my students, and that there's this theme that when people do a certain level of personal work and they get to a certain level of inner fulfillment, the natural next step is service. It's well, I don't want to be in this by myself. I want everyone else to experience this too. So how can we share this consciousness, ultimately, this state of being? How can we facilitate that for others? So I'd love to hear your journey from, super successful, checking all those boxes of high achiever, running successful companies, big exits, all of that stuff, which so many people aspire to now shifting to really being a messenger of something that is empowering to the world and guiding people on their own journey of self-discovery, taking them to these places that have been powerful for you in your journey. Can you share a little bit about that arc?
It started for me in 2017. Nassim Haramein invited me to come to Egypt. and he asked me to give a presentation. He gave me the keynote position for the week, and there were lots of great speakers that were there, but he gave me the best slot right before everyone was going into the Great Pyramid. Now, this was the same exact week and the same day, in fact, when we had the big shooting in Las Vegas in front of the fake pyramid, the Luxor pyramid. And I remember seeing that in the news and everything while I was over there. I'm like, wait a minute, here we are. We're all having this very profound experience in front of the Great Pyramid. And at the exact same time, there were like 175 of us, and there were like 571 people or something like that were, injured, shot, and many killed, right, that were in that terrible, terrible circumstance right in front of Luxor Pyramid. And I thought, that's the first thought I had, like maybe we're in some sort of simulation. And because it just seemed like a strange mirror reflection at the exact same moment in time. Well, I was asked to give a presentation on number theory and mathematics, which has been a passion of mine. It was more of a hobby from, I'd say, 2011, 2012 until like 2017. And Nassim had seen presentations that I'd given before on it, but only to scientists and to physicists and mathematicians. And so he asked me to go more broadly with it. So I presented to about 175 people that were there, plus all the staff. This was close to 200 people. And I was shocked because I presented math as a language of the universe. And it was not long after that movie, Contact. It wasn't Contact, rather. It was, what was the name of the movie that had Amy Adams in it? The one where she was a linguist.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Arrival. And it wasn't long after Arrival came out. And so people were like, this is like Arrival. You figured out the language of the universe. Oh my gosh. And at the end of what was supposed to be a 2-hour presentation that turned into a 4-hour presentation because there were so many questions, half the room was in tears. So I gave this presentation. At the end of the presentation, we all went to the pyramid. And afterwards, everyone came up to me and was like, look, can you teach a course on this? So I started thinking, gosh, I didn't even have a PowerPoint. I just took my handwritten notes and I took photographs of them. And basically that's what was my PowerPoint presentation in Egypt. And people had a profound experience with that. I was stunned by the whole thing. So I started teaching courses, and then I started posting geometric drawings on physics and mathematics and as a language of God, like language of universe. And all of a sudden, I never would have guessed it just took off like crazy. I was getting thousands and thousands of likes on these bizarre drawings that were just like my notes of my notebook. And then it's just exploded, right? And I never thought, and the whole reason why I was sharing it was not because I wanted to get a lot of followers. I didn't think anyone was going to want to follow it. It was because I felt that me sharing it, what I had been getting, somehow had some benefit to me. That was my first, it was like making it real for me. And so I was just sharing it with no other intention. I thought if one person might benefit from this, that's better than I ever thought that I was going to get anyway, right? I would post things because I thought if one person could get benefit from it, then it served better than I thought it ever could. And so it kind of exploded. I would just post these things, and I found that people had a really intense reaction to it. And then that led to, I've now published 6 books. 3 of the books are art books of just my notes. I'm doing the 4th and 5th right now as well. And I probably have enough material to do another 5 or 6 books even today. But I never thought that the impact was going to be so powerful. And for all of us that were there that night in 2017, we went to the Great Pyramid, in the exact same time, this horrific shooting that was happening in Las Vegas, to me, I immediately felt like this is like a strange mirror reflection. And it started to make me wonder, as people ascend, will there have to be an accompanying greater darkness with that greater light?
Can you explain what you mean by ascend?
As we start to become more and more aware of who we are and why we're here and what we're doing, this is what I would call the awakening and ascension process. When you start to replace judgment in your life with love and acceptance, then that's what I would call ascension. And I know that's hard for people to conceptualize because it's like, well, why would you replace love with judgment? You know, it's hard even to identify exactly what the opposite of love is. Some people think it's fear. Some people think it's hatred. I actually think it's judgment. And because the state that you're in when you are in love, a state of love, is one with no judgment. It's unconditional. And so I realized then that because, as Newton said, and not only Newton, but Einstein and many other physicists throughout time, every major scientist has always said every action must have also an equal opposite reaction.
So as you guys were in this process of elevating and expanding together through this presentation, you feel that there was this counter reaction going the other direction?
It was very bizarre. I can't say that I could directly tie it to that, but it was just one of those strange coincidences that I don't really believe in coincidences that much. And I can say that I believe, you know, it's almost like the movies, right? You think about a film like Lord of the Rings. So when Gandalf the Grey ends up falling down the chasm with that fiery dragon, you think he's gone, right? You think that's the end of Gandalf. But that's like one of the first few scenes of the film. And actually, he comes back as Gandalf the White. He comes back stronger, right? So he went from gray to white. So, of course, his hair went totally white and everything about him changed. And he became more powerful as a wizard. This was at the same time that all of a sudden the orcs got created. So we see this dualistic life or duat play out all around us all the time. Whenever a hero is born, there's always going to be a villain that somehow creates a boundary condition for the hero himself. And so we all, in our own hero's journey, will seek to find villains in our life. They don't have to be people. They might be things. It could be systems. It could be whatever it is, because this is how the hero gets defined by the boundary. The edge of the hero becomes the edge of the villain. Can the hero exist without the villain?
It's like a sacred relationship.
It's a sacred relationship, and there's nothing in the universe that basically is able to escape that reality. So I had to just wonder, it just seemed like a strange coincidence that here we were in Egypt at the same time, this is happening the same week, and we were having a really profound experience. And I think that this is true for all things that we experience. As we ascend, you would expect, and as people become more and more aware, they can tap into their own magic, they can tap into their greater light. We're talking about people going through DNA upgrades and such, right? 12-strand DNA. Well, for everybody that's going to be experiencing that greater light, there needs to be a backdrop of greater darkness. When I go to buy a diamond at a store, the first thing I do is say, hey, can you put that diamond in front of the black velvet? Because the black velvet absorbs everything. But by doing that, the diamond can shine more brightly. So in that context, maybe we're all in just a play of our own creation. And that what I think of as myself is me, and the you inverse of me is my universe around me. It's fully predestined. What I used to think of as destiny, I now think of as just the free will of the higher self. Because I believe that the one in the universe is accumulating more and more and more individualized conditioning biases, perspectives that are entirely subjective. Maybe the only objective truth could be accumulated through accumulation of all, the summation of all possible subjective realities that require eyes of perception that are all different. Maybe that feeds an overall system or Akashic record that could basically build on itself and is infinite. And so we are all growing from this. We're all growing through these different perspectives. But what we're facing now is everyone's feeling like, wait, what I thought was true may not be the whole truth. I spent my entire life collecting facts. I thought fact was fact. And I thought I was a better and better judge, discerning between those facts and being able to utilize them towards success in this 3D, 4D world. I, at a much later stage in life, started realizing that everything I thought was a fact was actually a facet. It was missing one little letter E in between the C and the T. And this facet was only one perspective on a larger prism of truth. That if I were to try to understand the entire truth, the entirety of possibility of truth, I would have to collect everybody's subjective perspectives. Mm-hmm. For each one contains within it their own facet of perspective. And that was a major shift. And so I stopped desiring the truth. Now, we just talked about the problem with desiring something, right? It actually has the effect of pushing something away. When we finally have the feeling that our desire for truth has been superseded by our expression of love, that is what I believe to be enlightenment.
When our desire for truth has been superseded by
our expression of love.
That's a beautiful definition of enlightenment.
That's what I really believe it is. And I don't think it is only for guys that wear, like, Jesus sandals. I think that it can be for people who wear Italian shoes too. I think that it can be for people who, can express themselves the way that they want to express themselves. We all have these archetypes of what we believe someone who is going through the awakening and enlightenment process should be and is. I don't think that there is a cookie cutter set. Mm-hmm. I think actually everybody will have their own path.
So how do you, in a very practical day-to-day way, work with your own judgment? Because we all have it, right? We can't, well, maybe when we're enlightened, we don't anymore. But judgment is just a part of our operating system in this current paradigm, I feel. Even for those of us who are aware that judgment is sort of the antagonist to love, or the thing that keeps us in a state of separation, it's still often there. Even there's also a lot of spiritual superiority, right? And spiritual judgment. Oh, yeah. So how do you work with that when it comes up?
Well, whenever someone says that, it's like, hey, I'm woke, it kind of makes me laugh to a certain extent when they also accompany that with a statement of judgment, mm-hmm. whatever that judgment is. Now, I'm a vegan and everyone should be vegan. Mm-hmm. I am fighting for the whales. How can you sit there in your privilege, right, while people are dying in Africa? Mm-hmm. This is sort of the mentality that's, you live in LA, so you know exactly what I'm mm-hmm. talking about. And so what I would propose to you is that is not really awakened. If you're still at a place of judgment, there's no such thing as spiritual superiority. It doesn't exist if you've basically transcended out of it. If you are transcendent of this notion of judgment and you're actually in a place of love, then you see everybody as divine. Everybody is the manifestation of God around you. And the moment that you think, well, everyone else is God and this rest of the world around me is God, but I'm the part that's not, that is actually ego. This belief that people have to have superiority, it's not. There's no such thing as spiritual superiority in that context, because you cannot ascend without the rest of the world around you also becoming this divine place to you. So the belief that we have that we are better than anyone else, no one of us, even as an ascended avatar, is any better than anyone else. So taking that mentality, they're all just at different stages of their journey, at their different soul realizations, what it is that they chose.
This is what you tell yourself when you notice judgment within yourself. You remind yourself of this.
You know what I do when I notice judgment within myself? I did it really bad with Donald Trump. I'll be honest. It was like, I'd watch Donald on TV. I'd be like, it just made me crazy. Like I get triggered by it. And until one day someone said, why are you so triggered by Donald Trump? And I started realizing around the same time that everything that I judged was actually an aspect of myself I didn't like.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
And so I started realizing that I was attracting everything I was judging until I no longer judged what I attracted.
And then just that awareness alone was enough to get you to not be triggered when you saw Donald Trump?
No, not in the beginning, but becoming aware of it was the first step.
First step, yeah.
Right? It's like getting over the denial. That's like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? It's like, okay, I am an alcoholic. I am the thing. I am that. I am. Mm-hmm. I am that, the thing that I judge, I am. So what I started doing is I forced myself every time I was triggered by Donald to say out loud, no matter where I was, I could be in a meeting or anything, and I would say, I am that I am. It was like my punishment to myself.
It's like
and then finally,
reprogramming.
It was a reprogramming.
In real time.
That was my neurolinguistic reprogramming.
Yeah.
Finally, I stopped getting triggered by him. And I've noticed the things that I continued to harbor a lot of judgment for, like pedophilia, right? Like corruption in government, these things. It's also because I continue to judge it, that the world is being filled with these notions right now. Because I don't see the world as it is, I see it as I am. So if it's in my world, it's another part of myself that I've still yet to integrate. Not that I'm going to accept pedophilia, but I'm going to become less triggered by it and become more objective, as it were, not so emotionally charged around it. And that's when you know that you've got an issue. When you're emotionally charged over a topic and you can't even really explain why, there's something deeper for you to learn. There's a wisdom path that you've basically been given by your higher self to find.
And I would say there's kind of this model of transcendence, right? You've used that word a few times, like I'm going to transcend beyond the thing and I'm going to see it from an expanded perspective and reframe it and reprogram it. And that's one aspect. And then I think often that feels like one component, but I guess coming back to this notion of integrated intelligence, in some ways you could say, alpha is sort of like the witness, the seer, consciousness itself. And that's the alpha pole. And then on the what I would call omega, which is like the feminine pole, the polarity to that, there's the immersion into the thing. And so this is an interesting, I don't know what I would call it, I guess it's a perspective really on how to transmute or alchemize emotion, specifically dark, heavy, negative emotion, what we would label as negative. Instead of only transcending it, which I think is one part of the puzzle, I think having the courage to actually fully feel it and meet it through not resisting and judging it and letting it process through the nervous system, it releases that energy from the physical body. Because we can't just do it all on the intellectual, psycho-spiritual plane. We have to do this work at the somatic level, at the nervous system level. This is what I'm super passionate about.
I could not agree with you more. And in fact, I wrote a book called Polymath. So polymathic thought, that's what I spoke at the Vatican about recently. Polymathic thought is just being able to integrate many learnings. Because mathematics used to just mean all learning, because it was the foundational language of all learning, until Aristotle narrowly classified it as the study of quantity, right? So polymathic thought is being able to be a musician, an artist, a mathematician, a physicist, you name it. It could be a carpenter, a geometer, all these things in one. So jack of all trades, master of none. But there's something that goes beyond this. There's a purpose. It's not just to accumulate knowledge and to be proficient at all these different possible careers. That is polymathy. I think there's a higher transcendence of polymathy, which is what I call polypathy.
Like empathy.
So as you're able to accumulate, the purpose of becoming a polymath is so that you can grok, you can actually synthesize all of these different perspectives that these different conditioning biases might lead to, people's different viewpoints. I can see the world in terms of how a liberal thinker might see the world. I can see it in terms of how a conservative thinker might see the world. I can see it as a scientist. I can see it as a physician. I can see it as a mathematician. I can see it as a scientist. I can see it as an artist. I can see it as a musician. So this is actually a reason for building up all of this ability to perceive more broadly is empathy. And that's why, for lack of a better term, I made up the word yesterday, polypathy. And it just means many feelings, because pathy means feelings. So it doesn't mean that you go to this intellectual place and you cut off your heart center. The heart, I often say this: when the heart thinks and the mind feels, the river of wisdom flows. When the heart thinks, now you might say, well, how can a heart think? Well, actually, there's a part of our heart that is right next to our thymus, and the SA node of our heart, the sinoatrial node of our heart, where there are brain-style neurons there. And the cerebellum regulates feeling in the brain. The emotional center is in the cerebellum. It's the base of the brain. It's just above where we think of the throat chakra to be. So this cerebellum allows the brain to feel, and the thymus and the SA node allows the heart to think. Being in absolute equilibrium with those two aspects is what you alluded to when we first started this discussion, which is how do you basically tap into the left and right brain, the masculine, the feminine, the alpha, the omega, right? And then you create this optic chi, the chiasm, where the right eye connects to the left occipital lobe and the left eye connects to the right occipital lobe. And where it connects is right at the pituitary gland. That awakening is what we call crown chakra awakening. And this is what's happening right now around the world. The pineal gland is activating. The crown chakra is activating. We're starting to realize that we're not just homo sapiens anymore. We have the potential to become homo sanctus luminous, sacred light. And that is our destiny. That's our next path. But it will happen for us more quickly as soon as we start to identify what it is our life path is, what our north node is. See, the astrology is actually an intrinsic critical aspect of this matrix simulation. Gene keys is another aspect of it as well. Mathematics and numerology. There's a reason why it's so accurate. It's not just happenstance. I don't believe in coincidence. Coincidence and not being able to see patterns and believing everything is random is just our inability to see God's encrypted patterns. And we are God. So that means that all the desires you have, you can let go of. You can feel as if you've already achieved them and sink into your life's journey. Find out what your north node is. It doesn't mean you're going to be some bump on a log and you're going to be some sort of like couch potato, but finding the way to find your ikigai amidst your north node is going to be the fastest and surest way for you to manifest, because your soul will recognize it because it's already happened. And once you start getting in that mindset of heart-brain coherence, when the mind thinks and feels, and when the brain feels and thinks, that's when everything starts to really come together. And so all your manifestations become a natural extension of you. You perceive the world as you are because you realize you are the world. It's a beautiful transition. I don't think many people have actually been able to experience yet, but I think more and more are experiencing it. And we can also believe that because every action must have an equal opposite reaction, that very likely the backdrop will get a little bit more challenging. Just as when you move up levels in a game, the next levels become more challenging in some ways. They might be differently challenging. But the most important thing to remember is that as this path towards love is littered with all of our judgments, once we can learn to transcend and realize that our expression of love and acceptance in our world, in our path, and everything in the world around us as well, because we already have everything as we wanted, we don't feel we need anything. Judgment is the source of all suffering. The desire that we have that comes along with those judgments is also an emanating source of that suffering as well. And the fact that you need something. We think we need all kinds of stuff to be happy. We don't. If you really think about it, what do you really need to be happy? I think the only thing we need to be happy is to know who we are and why we're here.
How do you define love?
I define love as, someone just posted something on my Instagram page, and they said, love is the desire to merge. I said, that's romantic love. It's a little different, right? It's like, yes, there's this polarity desire to merge. But I actually believe that not all forms of love result in a desire to merge. Right? Thank goodness. But I saw today, there was a strange video that was on Instagram that showed this deer with a full rack, like, full head rack, trying to mate with a donkey.
Oh, God.
And I immediately thought of what this guy was writing. He's like, love is a desire to merge. I'm like, well, some things will end up in manifestations, the others will not. But I started thinking to myself, what is the nature of love? I believe the nature of love is being able to understand and empathize with another. And not just one, but hopefully extend that to include all other sentient beings. They could be, flora or fauna, human or extraterrestrial or intraterrestrial. It doesn't really matter. It's this state of love which is really derived from not only comprehending their circumstance and their life path, of their chosen path as well, but also being able to empathize fully with it.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to have you here.
Yeah. I can't wait there's so many more things I could have talked about with you today, but we're going to save them for another time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.